Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to tonight's workshop on stress management for adults. We appreciate everybody coming and taking time to see Dr. Hutchins, who I know is Stephanie for the longest time. She is the owner of Serotinous Life, and is a certified life coach, also neuro-linguistic, right?
Yep, neuro-linguistic program.
And has her doctorate and knows advanced human biology. So we're really excited to have her here. Stephanie, please, if I have not introduced you or anything else of your background, please fill in the blanks.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm very appreciative for everyone taking the time out of their schedules to be here this evening. And I just want to let you know, I have a second screen. It looks like everyone's video is off, but if at any point you ask questions and I look to the side, it's because I'm looking over at my second screen. So I apologize for that. I'll try my very best to stay looking at my camera. So I wear a few different hats. And so I want to tell you a little bit about me, because I'm going to tie different aspects of all these hats I wear into today's discussion. Oh, and when I say discussion, every once in a while, I will ask if anyone has questions. So I encourage questions at any point. I treat this just the same as I would if I'm in a classroom with my students. And so, if you have questions at any point, please ask. But do know that the session tonight is going to be recorded. So if you'd prefer that your question is not on the recording, then just hold your questions till the very end. And once I'm done with my presentation, we'll stop the recording, and then I can answer any questions outside of that. Okay. One of the hats I wear is as a life coach and owner of Serotinous Life. And that's what I'm going to talk quite a bit about tonight in the work that I do with my clients. And but I also want to let you know some other things that I do. My full-time job currently is I work at the New York State Education Department for the Office of College and University Evaluation. And I love the fact that I get to oversee the programs that are being delivered to our students across New York State. And really ensuring the integrity of the programs. I feel it's important work, and I'm happy to be able to serve our students in that way. And I actually still get to serve the students, though, in the classroom. I have been teaching for over 11 years now, and most of those years were full-time. And now I still teach part-time at Hudson Valley Community College, and our semester is finishing up next week. I can't believe it. Now, I need you to know that I have taught most of these years anatomy and physiology. In recent years, I've transitioned into genetics and nutrition and evolution and classes like that. But I'm giving you that little insight as to this biology background because I can't help myself. I will bring in biology concepts into tonight's discussion. So I'll try not to get too scientific, but it's my love. Science is my love. So I'll talk about it whenever I can, I guess. And so my website is here, serotonouslife.com. And if tonight you don't get the opportunity to ask questions or you'd prefer not to ask in this setting, please feel free to reach out on an individual basis, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, so a little bit about this word serotiny. You know, people are always like, what is this word you chose for your business name? And it all ties into my love of biology, which we know means the study of life. And I love studying life and all facets of it. But serotinous cones are those cones that have a layer of resin on the outside of them, hence why there's a pine cone in my logo. But What's interesting about serotinous cones is they only open when exposed to fire. Okay, and types of some examples of trees that have serotinous cones are like the giant sequoias out in the western United States. And so here's a picture of some giant sequoias. If you've never seen them, they are massive, hence the word giant. You can see here, here's a person and here's a car, and this is just the trunk of these massive organisms. Now, what is so fascinating about these trees is how conservationists almost protected them into extinction. Okay, these beautiful, organisms, conservationists were trying to protect them by preventing fire from going through these forests. And what they started to notice over the years was that there were no new sequoias. It was only the older generations that were present. And what they realized was that fire was actually essential for melting the resin off from the cone and releasing the seeds. Okay. And what you have to know about my coaching practice is I focus primarily on working with individuals overcoming trauma and stressful life events. And that's why I chose the word serotinous life, because I believe we spend so much of our lives trying to avoid stressful life events and to avoid trauma and to wish that it never happened. But I think it's important to understand that sometimes it is the most stressful life events that we face that sometimes lead to our most massive growth and sometimes our richest life experiences. And I believe that very strongly because it's been my whole life experience. Now, I'm not going to tell you all about my story. If you're interested in that, I do have my story on my website. But what I will tell you is I have had a significant amount of trauma in my life. But since those occurrences, I have gone on to have some amazing life experiences. And I believe that I would never have had them without the numerous stressful experiences I have had in my life. Okay. And so, so what you have to know where I'm heading with this workshop is that I want to acknowledge the good that can come from stress and to acknowledge that stress is not all that bad. But what I am also going to acknowledge is that when we're in the midst of very stressful life events, it can feel overwhelming and sometimes almost like impossible to cope with. And so, after, I talk about some of the beautiful life experiences I've had, I will then move into some of the tools I've used to be able to help me through some of my darkest days. So maybe it can help you and others Okay, so so I have been so fortunate to be able to travel the world, and pre-COVID, of course. But like this picture, for example, is me experiencing right before I tried paragliding for the first time in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. And let me tell you, it was one of the most magical experiences of my life. So I highly recommend that you try it. But why I show you these things and why I'm going to show you like even the next pictures is because you have to understand how many dark days I have had in my life, so many. And many of them were because of traumas that I experienced. But then many of them were situations that I then put myself in later in life while I was working out ways to cope with my trauma, like overworking, for example. I was in college for 12 years, and during that entire time, I worked, and then since finishing college, including now, I work 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And so what you have to know is that I've dealt with stress, not in just, stressful traumatic events, but also from just having mounting obligations in daily life that just seem very challenging to sort of maneuver through. And I want you to know that I am so grateful that I have figured out ways to successfully maneuver some of these life events so I could experience things like paragliding in Russia, and like here, for example, is a picture of a leopard that I took when I was on safari in Tanzania and Africa. And like this here is one of the most spectacular rainbows I have ever seen. I experienced in Chile, actually on New Year's Day in 2019, while I was trekking through the Atacama Desert. And like here is another magical place on earth in Kamchatka in Russia, the Valley of Geysers. And again, I'm sharing this with you not to say, oh, these are all the wonderful things I've had in my life, but because when I was in my most stressful times, I could never imagine these life experiences. And so what my mission is now with, when I approach really just everyone, but particularly clients and even my students, is to give them hope. And I really feel that that's what education and coaching is about, is giving people hope that tomorrow will be better than today. And I truly believe that. And so I believe that sometimes by sharing my story and by sharing like how beautiful life can be, that sometimes it can give people hope that that again, tomorrow will be better than today. Okay. So, one more little adventure picture. One thing I love to do is climb glaciated mountains. We don't have glaciers here in the northeastern US. So when I travel around the world, I am climbing mountains and practice in the Northeast, doing things like ice climbing and preparation. And one thing, with teaching about the human body, I understand that when you are exposed to stress, your body will respond in one of 3 ways. It will respond by fighting, by fleeing, okay, or by freezing, okay? Now, what I truly believe is that you can learn to have fighting being your automatic response to stress if you practice. Okay, so there are a number of, it's not uncommon for some people when they are feeling extremely overwhelmed to want to retreat inwards and so to essentially run away from the situation, or they may be paralyzed and not know what action to take. Okay, but learning to take action when facing a stressful experience does take practice. And so people don't understand me. They think I'm nuts most of the time. And maybe there's some truth to it, but I am constantly pushing myself. I am pushing myself mentally and physically all the time. And the reason I do this is because the more I push myself, the more I can handle. It has built my confidence to huge proportions because I know with all that I have faced, whether on purpose or not, I can pretty much face any obstacle that life throws at me. So I am constantly pushing myself in the mountains, and, with challenges that I continuously feel are beyond my reach, and pushing myself to achieve them. And I do it even in the classroom. I have taught over 25 courses on the college level, and that comes from this same instinct to always put myself in uncomfortable situations so I can learn to grow and always improve. Because once you learn to be able to face a stressful situation head on, you're going to be able to better take action to move yourself out of it. Okay. Now, I know that can seem like some people might be thinking like, this is just not it's not real life. This is not realistic. So what I'm going to be focusing again on for a good portion of my slides that I have to present are tools that can help you in better coping with some of the more stressful times in life. So you're going to have hopefully the resources available to you so you feel more confident that you can more successfully navigate any stressful situation that you may be faced with. Okay, now here's another biology concept that I couldn't help but incorporate. Okay, excuse me, I gotta take a drink. Dynamic equilibrium. It's very, there are a number of people that very much try to resist change. They want everything in life to always stay the same, but it's like, it's a losing battle because life doesn't work that way. Every living system has what we call dynamic equilibrium being demonstrated through all aspects of the system. And so even if you take like our bodies, we never have a constant body temperature. We never have a constant blood pressure. We never have constant, hormones. Nothing is constant. And why I say this to you is because nothing is constant even emotionally, and nothing is constant even as far as like experiences in our life. And I believe that we have what we can consider emotional winters. Okay. And so like, if you want to, take from this chart I put together, all of these low points could be considered emotional winters. Well, what you have to understand is that there is nowhere on earth where there is a permanent winter. Okay. Winters always end. Okay. Always. All right. And after winter always comes spring and then summer. And so why I say this to you is because, again, it's all about hope, that no matter how stressful life may be, that there always is going to be better days ahead. Okay. And one other, thing I want to say is that another biology concept that I like to tell my students about is Wolff's Law of bone. Wolff's Law says that bone grows stronger based on the stress placed on it. So the more stress you place on bone, the stronger it will become. The same goes in the opposite direction. The less stress you place on bone, the weaker it becomes. And I believe that Wolff's Law is completely analogous to our lives. I believe that if we are constantly trying to shelter ourselves from stress, constantly trying to avoid facing stressful experiences, we could be missing out on opportunities to grow and thrive. So I guess one last push to sort of when the opportunity arises, to try not necessarily to run away from stress, but to figure out ways to sit with it and work through it, okay? And not let the stressful experience cause you to stagnate in one place, okay? And not make you to retreat backwards, but to to be able to sit with the stressful event, work through it, and come out stronger on the other side. Okay. Now, throughout my life, I have utilized numerous different techniques for trying to cope with stressful life events. And so what I'm going to do is talk about the ones that I have felt have been most beneficial to me. Now, before I start moving through some of these, I just want to open up to any possible questions or maybe even concerns people may have with this idea of sort of embracing stress and the good that may come from it. So, any questions, or do we have any pending, Chandra? I guess I should have said too, you could utilize the chat as well if you have questions.
I don't see any questions that have been brought up.
Okay. Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Now, again, I didn't mean excellent. You can ask questions anytime. Okay. But we'll continue. So first and foremost is self-care. Now, you guys, I'm going to try very hard to not give you all sorts of like cliches and, overused kind of stuff. But I do believe that some of this stuff can't be talked about enough, okay? Because it's not underrated. Self-care is not by any means underrated. And you are all here because you're parents, okay? And I think parents are most prone to not taking care of themselves, okay? And they do it many times with this desire to take care of the ones they love. But I believe with my whole heart that you cannot pour from an empty cup, okay? And this happens all the time with parents. It happens all the time with healthcare providers, people that are in a giving situation where they are expected on a regular basis to continually give of themselves. I find that they are the ones that are least likely to take care of themselves. But the more you are expected to give of yourself on a daily basis, the more you should be giving to yourself, because this is where burnout comes from. This is why parents can so easily get burned out when, they're dealing with their jobs and they're dealing with the home and they're dealing with maybe aging parents and, they're dealing with financial situations. Their kids are becoming teenagers now, and we know that that comes with a whole host of stresses associated with it. And now we've got a global pandemic on our hands. And so, it's like everyone, it's so common that people who are just giving of themselves to everyone else, that they then feel at the end of the day that there's nothing left to give to themselves. And that's where I hear all the time, I don't have time. I don't have time to take care of myself. But I challenge all of my clients, and especially my students, because I've always typically worked with at institutions predominantly that where I've had older returning adult students, and they are really lacking on the self-care aspect of their life. And so I truly believe that this is one area that can't be skimped on. Okay, because if you have nothing else to give, how are you going to, be the best parent? How are you going to be the best employee? How are you going to be the best daughter, the best son, the best anything? You're not, okay? Now, there are so many ways to practice self-care, okay? And so some of the things I'll be bringing up are ways to practice self-care, and so move through them. One way to practice self-care is through practicing mindfulness. Now, one thing you have to know about me as well is I'm a certified yoga instructor. So yoga and meditation and mindfulness are something I feel very strongly about, particularly regarding their benefits, okay? And so mindfulness is about practicing being present, okay? I'm going to come back to this slide in a moment, but I want to come to a quote that you may have heard of before. And I'll read it to you. It says, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. Now, this quote gets attributed to a few different people. One person is commonly attributed to is Lao Tzu, but there's other people. That's why I didn't put a name here. If ever you see quotes, that's a commonly used quote, but there doesn't seem to be consensus on who should be credited as the author. So, but I want you to know it's not my words, okay? But I do believe there's truth in this quote, okay? If you are focusing on the past, you are focusing on things that are completely out of your control. And how can you not be depressed when you're focusing on things that are completely unchangeable, okay? Whereas the future, well, you have to know something, you guys. I am completely about goal setting. I love setting goals. Love it. Love setting goals. But you have to understand, by spending most of your time focusing on a future that you have no idea what's going to come in the way of your plans, can create a lot of anxiety. I tend to run on the high strung side myself. And so it's not surprising, with me being very future focused, that I tend to be a little high strung, because it's always, I have this plan, but this plan, the more extravagant the plan is, the more things that can get in the way of altering that plan. Okay, so that can create a lot of stress and anxiety. So where we find the most peace in our lives is by staying present. And that's what mindfulness is. It's a practice of being present. And there are so many ways to practice mindfulness. And so you guys know, my goal is to give you a lot of different resources for you to use. And so I've put together some YouTube playlists of some of my favorite speakers or talks on some of the topics I'm going to be covering. And so I'll be providing this PowerPoint so you can have access to the links. And what you'll see when you go to this playlist will be some what I think are helpful self-care talks and different ways to practice mindfulness. But so every once in a while I'm going to just check time. I love to talk, as you can tell, so I want to make sure to respect everyone's time and not run over. So practicing mindfulness can, again, take many forms. It can be when you're with your loved ones, okay? Like, how many times do we, even ourselves, do we get sucked into our phone or TV, and our kids or our spouse or somebody is trying to talk with us and we aren't focusing because we're focusing on something else? Well, you can practice mindfulness by being present with the person that's in front of you. And I have personally found that by practicing mindfulness in that way, it can completely enrich, I found my own relationships, okay? You can practice mindfulness with eating. And this is something I have found to be extremely helpful. So I think I told you that one of the classes I teach is nutrition. And in my nutrition classes, I have the students do a mindful eating assignment where they have to spend a day where everything they eat, they focus on what are the emotions they're feeling before they eat. So what's driving them to eat, to pay attention to hunger signals so they don't overfill their stomach. And I also encourage them to eat at least one meal in silence every day, particularly during the day of the assignment. Because when you are distracted by watching TV or talking or, listening to something, you can't listen to the signals your body is telling you. And I was so, the first time I did this assignment, I do it at the end of the semester, and 2 weeks after class was done, one of my students emailed me to tell me how much mindful eating has changed her life. She had lost 17 pounds since she had started practicing mindful eating, just by being aware of what she was taking into her body and listening to her body. And that's what mindfulness is. It's listening to the signals your body is sending you, and it's listening to the signals that the people around you are sending you. Okay, so it's paying attention to your loved ones and how they're responding to you. It's responding to your colleagues or anyone else you interact with on a regular basis and how they are responding to you. And again, this can change the way you experience life, and it can make you more grateful for what you have in front of you. And I'm going to talk about this a little more in a little bit, about how essential gratitude is, especially if we're going to pull ourselves out of a difficult life circumstance. Okay. Now, so again, yoga instructor. So breathing is, something we focus on. It's a basic yoga principle, the significance and the importance of breath. And one type of breath that I love to teach my clients and my students, I actually teach all my students the 3-part breath. And I also, before every big exam, do an optional meditation for them so they can focus on their breathing and calm their thoughts. But I always, when I tell people, like, one thing, if there was one thing that they could do to change their experience in a given stressful situation, it's changing your breath. Okay, changing your breath is hands down the quickest way to bring down your heart rate, bring down your respiratory rate, and to stop racing thoughts, or to at least calm them down. Okay, now, because of time's sake, I don't have the time to go over how to conduct the 3-part breath. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I have taped myself describing how to do the 3-part breath and put it on my website. And so by clicking the link here, it'll bring you to that, and you'll be able to watch the video, and I give you a little bit of the science behind the 3-part breath and why it works. But what you have to understand is that when we are really stressed, our sympathetic nervous system, the one that stimulates the fight or flight response, it is the one that speeds up heart rate and speeds up respiratory rate and gets, your mind where it may not be as clear if you're really, really overwhelmed. And so one way to stop the sympathetic response is by overriding it, by stimulating the parasympathetic response. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system is the exact opposite in most cases to the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic division is our rest and digest division. It's the one that slows our heart rate down and slows our respiratory rate down. And the best way to do it is by taking very slow, deep breaths that go into your belly and expand your rib cage. And again, I wish I could go over it now, but I encourage you to look into breathing techniques like this that will encourage you to breathe deeper, because what it will do is activate a nerve called the vagus nerve when you really contract your diaphragm and bring it down. And by stimulating that nerve, you are activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And I have done this in workshops, in live, where people are doing these activities, and you'll have people, I encourage you to try it yourself. If you have a smartwatch, I encourage you, once you learn how to do the 3-part breath, or you can try other deep breathing techniques, to look at your heart rate at the beginning, okay? And then look at your heart rate and see how it's changed after like a minute or two of practicing. And you're gonna see it comes down very quickly, okay? Now, again, as a yoga instructor and somebody who teaches meditation regularly, I cannot say enough benefits about meditation. And I will say I practice meditation daily, at least once a day, but many times twice a day. I always practice at night before I go to bed. But in the daytime, I usually, particularly if it's particularly stressful, will practice again during the day. But meditation, I'm telling you, in meditation, another reason it's so helpful is because usually what you're focusing on is your breath, okay? But meditation is all about bringing your focus to a single point. Now, if you are focusing on your breath, for example, you're not as likely to going to be focusing on all the distractions you have in your life. Now, people, I hear it all the time. It's a very common default where people say, oh, I can't meditate. Oh, I can't meditate. I'm distracted all the time. But that's the point. Meditation is a practice. It's about training your mind to keep coming back to a specific point of focus. And you don't have to meditate for a long time. When I meditate, I usually meditate for 10 to 15 minutes at a clip at a time. And that's it. Okay, there are times I'll meditate for half an hour, but I usually don't meditate for longer than that. I find that even 10 minutes is very beneficial. But you don't have to start with 10 minutes, start with 1 minute. 1 minute, that's it. You can move it up to 2 and then 3. And there are many different ways to practice meditation, but I've taped another video and put it on my website so you can view one of the easiest forms of meditation that I recommend to people that are starting out, okay? But why we call meditation as we call it a practice is because it takes time to train your mind, to pull your mind away from the work stress, the financial stress, the stress with your children, the stress of the pandemic. It takes practice to draw your mind away from that into something else. Okay. And so by regularly practicing, your mind will be trained to always come back to your point of focus. I mean, I want you guys to think, like, how many times have you been at work and you've gotten distracted because you were thinking about something that happened at home that morning or the night before? Or how many times have your kids or your significant other been trying to talk to you about something and you were distracted and couldn't listen because of something that happened at work earlier in the day? This happens all of the time. And this is why meditation is so helpful, because meditation is all about training your mind to come back to your point of focus. And that's why meditation and mindfulness can be very closely intertwined with one another, because mindfulness is about staying present and staying focused on what's in front of you. And that's what meditation is about. So by always bringing your attention back to that point of focus, it's going to increase your productivity at work. It's going to increase your relationships. This is not like, I know this works, because how can it not? How can it not improve your relationships if you become a better listener, if you're present with those people that matter the most to you and impact your life the most, okay? How could it not improve your life and your productivity at work if you could be hyper-focused on the task at hand in front of you? Think about how much less time at work you would have to spend if you would be hyper-focused during the time that you're there. And I'm going to tell you, I am hyper-focused when I'm working, and I credit that to my constant practice of meditation and mindfulness, because I'm just constantly focusing on my task at hand. And it's how I can manage multiple jobs at a time, because when I'm with one job, I'm with that job, okay? And I am not getting pulled away by anything else. But it's taken time to get there, and but it's been invaluable to me. Okay. Oh, gotta watch my time. Again, positivity. You know, our days are filled with a lot of negativity, particularly if we watch the news. You may or may not have heard of a concept called negativity bias. Humans have a negativity bias where we are more likely to pay attention to negative events and negative news because we are constantly watching out for things that could threaten our survival. Unfortunately, the news and other media sources know that we have this negativity bias, so our news feeds and news headlines are all filled with things that give us shock and awe value, you know? But unfortunately, that can give us a jaded view of the world. And so when our days are filled with this constant barrage of negativity, we have to combat that in some way. And so I encourage you every single day to find things to be grateful for. You know, I, as part of my daily meditation that I do, my one that I always do at night before I go to bed, part of the beginning portion of my meditation is a gratitude practice. So during the beginning portion of the practice, I go through things from my day that I was grateful for. And if I have difficult time with that, if it was a particularly overwhelming day, then I go onto things in my life in general that I'm grateful for. And so I am ending my day with positive thoughts. And this is where, if a day is particularly stressful, where I'll meditate again and begin it with gratitude, so that I remind myself about the positive in life when I'm currently immersed in a lot of negative, okay? Now, one way that I fill my days with positivity is by listening to uplifting audio. And so I regularly have my phone on when I'm getting ready in the morning or getting ready for bed at night or washing the dishes. I have either an Audible book on that I'm listening to, or I'm listening to motivational or inspirational speakers on YouTube. And so what I've done is created a playlist on YouTube that you can find here with some of my most favorite speakers and some of my most favorite talks from them. And they're just ones that really help lift me up. So if I'm feeling, you know, down or feeling like I need a little jolt of inspiration, these are speakers I listen to. And so again, I put together some of my favorite clips of theirs. I encourage you to take a look. And one way that we can practice gratitude practice being positive every day is by practicing gratitude every day, finding things that we're grateful for. And again, that's what I was saying, that that's why I incorporated it into my daily meditation. Okay. Now, this may seem a little silly, but one thing that I encourage people as a resource to use when they are feeling particularly depressed, I encourage this, but just down or anxious, I encourage them to change their body's position. Okay, so if you're feeling really down or really overwhelmed, it is so important to have movement in your body. Okay, and so one way to do that is with dancing. Okay, now you don't have to be good at it, but I think that we all have likely music that makes us want to sing or it makes us want to dance. And I encourage everyone to have a playlist on YouTube. You can do a YouTube playlist for free of your favorite songs. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can have a free Amazon Music account. But there's, oh, sorry, you guys, I hit my microphone. There are lots of ways to create playlists. And so they're like another go-to. Like my preferred is to go to my go-to motivational speakers, but on my really down days, I go to music. Music is my, like, I know for me, it's my one that can pick me up when I'm most down, okay? Because there's just some songs I know that when I listen to them, they're always gonna pick me up. And when I get, moving around, it automatically changes the way I feel, okay? So it's a very quick way to get you out of maybe a difficult headspace, okay? And another way to, change your body's position is by getting up and moving. So another go-to of mine is exercise. It's always been a go-to for me. I love walking, and so I love hiking. I just love being outdoors. But I encourage everyone to get their heart rate up every single day, okay? Now, there's lots of recommendations. A lot of places recommend a minimum 20 minutes a day, preferred 30. I know that might overwhelm some people. So start with 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but get out and you can even do it with dancing, moving around, something that gets your heart rate up. And why that is so important is, again, sciencey stuff here, is that when you get your heart rate up, it starts stimulating a whole host of neurotransmitters to be released. And neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. Well, if any of you are familiar with some of the medications that are used to treat depression and anxiety, guess what kind of neurotransmitters they're targeting? Norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Well, you can naturally increase these feel-good chemicals just by exercising, just by getting your heart rate up. Okay, and that's why there are people who love to run, people like me who love to hike. I love to get my heart rate up. I love to push myself because I feel so good afterwards. And it's a very natural thing because all of those feel-good chemicals are being released. And the longer you're engaged in the activity, the more of those chemicals that are going to get released, okay? And that's what keeps people coming back. We refer to it as a runner's high, okay? Another thing I encourage throughout much of my life, I've encouraged, I've used myself creativity. So I love to paint, actually, but throughout different parts of my life, I'd write poetry and I draw. Later life, it was painting. But it's a great way to get your mind off from your troubles. And again, you guys are all parents here, so it's a great way even to engage with your children and to encourage them to have an outlet and a way to maybe express themselves and how they're feeling, and they just can't put the words to it. And that's the same for adults. We have trouble putting words to the way we're feeling, and sometimes we can express it through art. And I find it very, very helpful. And one of the most, I guess, helpful things too, I think it's one of the most helpful, but also one of the hardest to do, particularly when we're in the thick of stressful events, is working on shifting our mindset. And so I have another playlist for you of different speakers talking about the importance of shifting our mindset and changing perspective and techniques on how to do it. But this is the work I do with my clients mainly, is working on changing mindset and changing your perspective. So when you're in a stressful situation, how can you reframe it and look at it differently? Okay. unfortunately can't go over it in great depth. So again, I know there's a lot of resources, but I encourage you to hone in on the ones that you think speak to you the most and will be most helpful to you, and browse through them, okay? And this is also sometimes easier said than done, but I think it's important to control only what is within your control. I challenge everyone to think of how much stress in your life is caused from you trying to change the unchangeable and change people that you can't change. The only person you can change is you, and the only person's response you can change in a situation is your response. And that takes practice, okay? And so, we try so hard, we get so angry at our coworkers, we get so angry at our children and our significant others because they're not doing what we want, but we have absolutely no control over them. And so by focusing on you, we can focus on what is in your control, okay? And you only. And one thing I'll leave you with, so one of my certifications I have is I'm a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. And in neuro-linguistic programming, we call it NLP, we have a basic assumption. One of our basic assumptions in NLP is that we are all working perfectly. And so what that means is that we are all doing the very best we can with the knowledge and resources we have at that moment in time, okay? So I think it's important, one, that you remember that, so you cut yourself some slack, when you're not maybe the best parent, or you're not the best spouse, or you're not the best, employee. Cut yourself some slack. We only can do so much, and we're all doing the very best we can. But I think that also means that as much as we've got to cut ourselves slack, we also have to cut others slack as well. And I know it's easier said than done in real life, but I encourage everyone to, and I think this will come with, as well with practice, of staying mindful and staying present, is to really think in the moment, why, if you're angry at somebody for something they did or did not do, instead of trying to get angry at them, maybe try to put yourself in their shoes, with your children, employees, whatever it may be. Why are they acting that way? And by you responding in this way to them, it will automatically decrease your stress, because anger and frustration is going to just make you more overwhelmed. But empathy and compassion can bring that overwhelm down, okay? Now, if you're interested in learning more about what I do one-on-one coaching, and I do it all through Zoom, but I also have online courses, one that's geared towards people overcoming trauma, and others dealing with our more typical daily stressful life events. So I encourage you to look that over if you're interested. And a base camp right before I summited the highest point in Europe. It's in Russia, Mount Elbrus. Love this picture. And I guess I'll just leave you with, it's something I tell all my clients, that hope and healing are possible. And I hope maybe today I gave you something that you could use to help yourself through some of your hard days. And if you have any questions, I'll encourage you to stick around and ask them. But what I'll do now is ask Chandra if you could stop the recording, and then people will feel free to stick around and ask questions once we're done. Now that we're done.